A common complaint by many a Commander player in white is that it lacks card draw. Now, while it might not be as good as blue and or green in this territory, there are draw engines in white, believe it or not. Now, while they may appear meek at first, over the course of a long game, they will show their worth. Now, let me preface this by stating there are a lot of casual and competitive cards in the mix here, and I'll try to do my best by distinguishing them. But this list, in very particular order, is our top 5 draw engines in white. And coming in at number 5 is Takacia's Welcome and Welcoming Vampire. For the Welcome, we have a 2 generic 1 white enchantment. Whenever 1 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And for the Welcoming, we have 2 generic 1 white 2/3 creature vampire, flying. Whenever 1 or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. We decided to put both of these at the number 5 slot for 1, their names, but also 2, as both are very similar. Each of these are better or worse in different situations, but both only trigger once per turn. Having access to consistent draw in white is very strong, as it turns extra tokens, hate bears, or other small creatures into extra cards. Both cards can also trigger on your opponent's turn, so cards or commanders that put creatures into play at instant speed really maximize these cards' potential. White as a color has always been very fair in Commander, outside of some grisly stacks pieces. And these 2 draw engines fall right in line with that theme. Some commanders that these 2 cards shine in are Darien, King of Keljor, and Heliod, God of the Sun. Coming in at number 4, we have SRAM, Senior Edificer. For 1 generic and a white 2/2 legendary creature dwarf advisor, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. When it comes to draw engines in Commander, SRAM Senior Edificer is definitely a card that requires some deck building around. But if you can maximize his abilities, the payoff is huge. If you're running a vehicle deck, you'll never say no to more cards. And with 2 power, SRAM can also be perfect for early game crewing and combat. Where SRAM really shines though is in Voltron style decks, where auras can be notoriously flimsy. By loading up a creature with a ton of auras, you can force your opponents to exhaust their resources dealing with it, only to do the same thing the next turn. SRAM is an absolute must-have in any deck with 15 or more auras or equipment. If you're running Ardent or Depala Pilot Exemplar decks, then SRAM is all the more powerful in those builds. So for that build-around draw engine that can give you serious firepower, SRAM is definitely a card to consider. Coming in at number 3, we have Smuggler's Share. For 2 generic and 1 white enchantment, at the beginning of each end step, draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. If you're looking for a powerful draw engine in white, then look no further than Smuggler's Share. At a cost of 2 and a white, passing the all-important Mana Crypt test, Smuggler's Share provides extra cards that can quickly add up, giving you 3+ cards per turn cycle in late game. And the added treasures are pure bonus. Perfect for punishing opponents who play and crack their fetch lands the same turn or try to ramp excessively. This card is at its best in white decks that excel at board control, as it helps to level the playing field when your opponents go off on a huge turn. It's a great addition to any deck that looks to play board police and can be a real game changer in those builds. So if you're looking for a card that provides consistent value and helps you keep up with your opponents, then Smuggler's Share is definitely worth considering. Coming in at number 2, and my personal favorite, we have Esper Sentinel. For 1 white, 1/1 artifact creature human soldier, whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. When it comes to white card draw engines in cEDH, there's simply no better option than Esper Sentinel. This card is an absolute game changer, providing early digging to help you recover from a bad start, and later on it goes into overdrive when opponents get into a war on the stack. Even outside of competitive EDH, this card is still incredibly formidable. The Sentinel really shines in a deck that can give it extra power, as opponents are unlikely to tap out just to deny you a card. As the game goes on, the card only gets better, often netting 6+ cards in a casual game. In fact, modern players have even started slapping Colossus Hammer, another favorite of mine, on the Sentinel, taking full advantage of its potential. So if you're looking for a card that can provide consistent card draw and scale with games, then look no further than Esper Sentinel. It's a must-have for any white deck that wants to stay competitive. And finally, at the number 1, we have Archivist of Ogma. For 1 generic and a white 2/2 creature halfling cleric. Flash, whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain 1 life and draw a card. The top spot on this list goes to none other than Archivist of Ogma, a card that seems okay at first glance, but don't let this halfling's unassuming appearance fool you. This card is an absolute house in Commander. With the amount of searching that occurs in your average game, from fetch lands to tutors, the number of cards you'll draw with Archivist is staggering. It's the perfect addition to any deck that churns through cards. Unlike any other card on this list, the Archivist scales incredibly well with power level. The higher the power level of your playgroup, the more fetches and tutors you'll see, make this card even more valuable. Whether you're playing a mono white deck or a multicolored brew, the Archivist is an amazing addition that is sure to bring you a ton of value over the course of a long game. Don't underestimate the power of this unassuming, incredible card. That's it for our top 5 draw engines in white. Let us know if your favorite was on this list, and if it wasn't, leave it in the comment section down below. But for more news and coverage on your favorite TCGs, subscribe to LGG. Also, feel free to send this along to the next gamer with a like. Thank you guys.